Welcome to 15-Minute Consulting Best Practices. My name is Maria Isabel Rios, and I'm joined today by Alex Wolff. Alex, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Maria. It's good to be here.
Alex is the Public Sector Director for Softwire. Softwire is a UK-based digital consultancy and software development firm. And we specifically wanted to have Alex join us because Softwire, under his guidance, has consistently won a lot of public sector projects. In fact, he and his team recently landed 2 massive multi-year contracts. So there's no better person I can think of to ask your questions about how to win projects with public sector clients than Alex. Alex, it is an honor to be here with you today. So for you who are joining us live, you know how this dynamic works. You type in your questions. It takes us a minute to see it, and the discussion gets enriched by your comments, by also your experience. So don't be shy and start asking Alex your questions for the day. And in the meantime, because you know it takes us a little bit of a moment, we're going to start with questions that came in during the week for you, Alex, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
All right, Jaren, why don't you show us one of the first questions that came in? Okay, this question is from Robin. She says, hello, Alex. My fledgling consulting firm is about to engage with our first large public-private institution. Broadly, what are some of the nuances and common practices that I should be aware of as the engagement commences? Is there anything you'd recommend for us to keep in mind as we enter the early stage onboarding process, which will involve interviews with leadership and key stakeholders? All right, so Robin has won an engagement, first one, and is looking for guidance what to do different. What do you think, Alex?
It's a really interesting one because if you're already in the position where you've won it, that's a brilliant place to start from. And I think kind of you concentrate on what's different. I think the first thing is the way you won that will have been kind of by bringing across what you know from private sector and from other opportunities. And that's what they've bought. You know, so looking at what's different, but making sure you don't stop doing the things that they've already kind of bought into. A lot of it will be the same kind of in the delivery. I think kind of what we found that can feel a bit different is sometimes it's the language and just making sure that you very quickly get to grips with their language. You know, things like CTO, CXO level, you know, just won't translate. And sometimes it's then also the motivations. So some of the language that works really well in private sector about kind of your stakeholder mapping and about personal motivation, we find in public sector, we have to position everything through the lens of, you know, what's right for citizens, you know, how are we doing the greatest good, you know, and some of the commercial discussion kind of downplays a little on that. Often you'll find that people in the space are there because they've got a real passion for it. So if you can kind of map out what their kind of outcome objective is here, you know, and at the organizational level as much as at a, you know, individual ambition stage, that can just give you a really good common language for working with them. And then I guess the final thing I'd say is the procurement team and the bid team who may have helped sign off on your piece, don't forget them. You know, they can kind of very much fall to the background while you're doing the work. But when it comes to an extension or bidding for a next phase, you know, and whether that goes direct to you or goes to an open procurement, how informed they've kept, how much they felt respected through can really help determine the route they follow. So kind of treating them as a stakeholder, even when they're a bit less visible on the day-to-day, is worthwhile. And we try and catch up with our procurement kind of colleagues, you know, at least once a month during an engagement. We find that helps a lot. Just a couple of things. I'm sure there's lots more.
I love what you're mentioning, Alex, along a few fronts, and it maps kind of in parallel really well with things we emphasize, right? In the private sector as well, which is your stakeholders, all of them, right? Don't forget the stakeholders you don't have in front of you regularly, but also connect really well with what people want. and how, what are their goals? What do they really want out of projects? I have a question that builds on Robin's, if that's okay, which is about the timelines of the how people think about success, right? Because oftentimes, I don't know if you have found this to be true or not, that there is this perhaps a myth or this notion that in public sector, sometimes the timelines as how we think about success are more portrayed or are longer than how we think about success in private sector. Do you find that to be true or not so much? How would you think about it?
I think the timelines for success feel like they might be the same. I think the timelines for failure can feel longer. I think in public sector, you can have more runway before something is kind of like, okay, lost interest in this, cutting it off. Often in public sector, and I worked in private sector before, but in public sector, there is more reluctance to pivot or kill something off if it's not working, because that suggests that you made the wrong decision in the first place. Whereas I think in private sector, you're paying more, the cost being paid month by month for keeping it going, it gets more scrutiny. So that can act as a real positive as well, in that, it can give you the runway to kind of get something past some early teething issues, and forward, but it can also lead to slight, zombie projects. And I think that's where the impression of it's all very slow comes from. The successful projects can be successful really quickly. The ones that feel slow are the ones that probably should have been killed quite a while ago.
Right. And so what I'm hearing you say between the lines is set up your metrics, the important metrics, and track them for success just as rigorously, so that you're making progress, and you can make sure you're aligning towards that project, so that you're not dragging on a zombie project, to play on your words, for too long, and you're course correcting effectively if you need to as well.
Yeah, and because sometimes public sector buys, is quite used to people who solely work in public sector. Actually, when someone with a bit more of that drive and okay, this is what it looks like comes along, it can be such a breath of fresh air. Kind of, we've brought that, we've had partners who we've seen bring that, and the public sector can be really open to that kind of momentum, excitement, metrics, outcomes that come from private sector. So actually, they can see that as a real positive.
Fantastic. All right, Robin, if you're here, hopefully you are, let us know if that was helpful for you, or if you have additional questions around this topic. And Todd, I see your question. Thank you, Victor, for participating and chiming into Todd's question. We will address your question, Todd, next week when we go back to the topic of consultancy. I think Tom is saying that he's not seeing us. Okay, so hopefully he can refresh his browser, or Victor or Todd, you can suggest to Tom in the comments that he can refresh his browser, because we're here. We've been here for quite a bit. People may having issues seeing it, which is why we may not see as many comments. Let's go on to the next question then.
Maria, I had a message from someone else who was expecting to see it, who said they also can't see it.
Okay, so let's put it. Let's make sure we put a comment in the comment section to ask them to refresh browsers or something like that. Because if we do anything on our end, it will kill our session. Thank you, Alex. All right, so that's the issue. So we figured that one out with 5 minutes to go. All right. Yes. Try refreshing your browser. All right. Let's go, Jaren, on to the next question that came in during the week. This question is from Robert. Robert asks, don't all government projects go through RFP or through bids or some sort of tender? And if so, isn't your process just about being as low cost as possible so you'll win the bid? Okay, this is what we call a softball for you, Alex. What are the lowest cost option always win?
Um,
You have a lot to say.
yeah, I mean, certainly that is a perception people have of public sector. It's one that we've been swimming against, since we set up, because public sector services are really important. I genuinely believe that's why we set up the division here. And the lowest cost option often isn't going to be the best option. I think part of the work we do when we look at tenders is to try and answer the exact question that you've asked, which is, what is this person trying to buy? So if it's a commodity service, if what they're trying to buy is phone service or paper clips, or, in the case of maybe the UK, they're trying to buy a really simple kind of website, something like that, they probably should go with the lowest cost option. But we also probably shouldn't be competing for that. What we do find is that quite often you can tell from the language, from the questions they've chosen to ask and the one they've chosen to admit, kind of whether they're a value or a price buyer. And we explicitly draw a line and we write price at one end, value at the other, and we try and mark where we think they are from everything they've put out. So if they're talking about kind of very commodity services, they're probably going towards the price. If they're weighting price 40%, then yep, probably the same. But you'll find other people who are weighting price as low as it can be, and the language they're using is all about importance and the outcome. And we think for them, you can make a really strong value case. You can't ignore cost, but you focus on getting them the most value per pound. And with government, quite often, if they've got a budget, they'll either spend it or it will get taken back. So, for some of them, it can be about how much can you give me for this price, and if you've got skills or specialism, then you can often give more without dropping day rates and without kind of really race to the bottom.
Exactly. So I am sure if you could disclose, you would list quite a few projects that you have won where you were not the lowest tender, or you were not the lowest proposal to come across the desk of the selection committee. And in fact, by quite a bit, right? But they went with the expertise, the ability to deliver on what was requested, much like when you do it in private sector, when there's an RFP or when there's a tender in private sector as well.
Yeah, exactly. The scale of public sector projects can be so large that, if you're advising them on their decision, whether they should, invest in X or Y, whether they should do sovereign AI or use something else, getting that decision wrong can have hundreds of millions of pounds of impact for them. Right. And the difference between a day rate or a different day rate is, it's a rounding error. So there's a lot of buyers there with important problems, that really it's not just about lowest cost, and kind of our success, I think, has showed that again and again. Exactly.
So be wary of that misconception. Be wary of thinking, okay, I just got to take the price down so fast that you lose your ability to provide expertise or to provide value on the other end of the proposal. And also, like Alex said, if your firm provides a certain type of services and low cost is not your highest value add, as is the case for Softwire, then recuse yourself from bids that are going to be awarded solely on price, right? That's not your best spot to play in, probably.
Yeah, and Frank mentioned having a rubric on grant proposals. I think one of the things that I would say is it's really important to understand how they score, so within that, you still make your value case, and you assume that the people choosing know they're going to have to work with you, they care about the outcome, so they're going to want to choose the best. But if you understand exactly what it is, you can make a much better decision, and sometimes it will give you an answer which isn't the one you like, but says this one's not for us,
Exactly. Thank you. And with that, Alex, we've come to the end of our 15 minutes. They go by really fast. So thank you for your insights today. So 3 calls to action for all of you who are listening and all of you who are waiting to listen, and we'll hear it on replay, I guess, for today. The first one is, if you want to know more about Softwire, thank you, Jaren. You've shared their webpage. Visit their webpage, but also connect with Alex. In addition to connecting with myself, we're both delighted to connect with you. So if you like what you heard today, if you want to know more, connect with us. And lastly, if you want to come back to the space, get your questions answered, and participate in the discussion, add davidafields.com/Monday Live to your calendars. It will bring you to this spot every Monday. And that way you can ask questions and get the answers that you need. So thank you for joining. Thank you, Alex. It's been great to learn from you today. Appreciate your expertise and your time. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
and
Maria.
For everybody else, go create success for your clients and for your consulting firms. Thank you.